Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Curious Cat Crime Sunday. I apologize for the last 2 weeks as I have had issues that have kept me away from being able to record, but today's episode is going to be on the Amityville murders, and we are so happy that you are here. Let's get to it. For decades, the Amityville horror has captivated audience, a scary movie about a haunted house that forced a family to flee after just months. This film has inspired many people to seek out the real Long Island home behind the eerie tale, but often lost in the shuffle is the brutal crime that supposedly made the house, quote, haunted, quote, the Amityville murders. The real-life horror story began on November 13th, 1974, when a 23-year-old man named Ronald Defoe Jr. fatally shot his parents and his four younger siblings while they slept in their home in Amityville, New York. Hours after murdering them, Defoe went to a nearby bar crying for help. Defoe initially claimed to police that the murders had likely been a mob hit, and his act was apparently so convincing that he was taken to a local station for protection. But it didn't take long for cracks to form in his story, and by the next day he had confessed to killing his family himself. However, the Amityville murder case was far from over. When Defoe went to trial, his lawyers built a case that he was an insane man who became a killer because of a demonic voice inside his head. And about a year after the slaughter, a new family moved into the home where the murder took place. They fled the residence in just 28 days, claiming it was haunted. Though the crime had often been an afterthought throughout the years, thanks in part to the popularity of the Amityville horror, it's even more horrifying than anything Hollywood could have ever dreamed up. On the outside, the Defoes appeared to live a happy life on Long Island during the early 1970s, according to the New York Times. One of their neighbors described them as a nice, normal family. The family was comprised of Ronald Defoe Sr. and Louise Defoe and their 5 children, Ronald Jr., Don, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. They lived in an affluent part of Long Island called Amityville. Their Dutch colonial home had a swimming pool and a nearby boat dock. Inside the house there was life-size portraits of the family hung on the wall. One local girl told the Times that Ronald Defoe Sr. had frequently given her rides to her family's restaurant in Brooklyn. Another neighbor named Catherine O'Reilly said the Defoes had befriended her after her husband passed away. As soon as the families were kind, loving people, but the Defoes were a very different family behind closed doors. Ronald Defoe Sr. managed an auto dealership, a job that certainly couldn't support the family's lavish lifestyle. Instead, much of their money came from Louis' father, Michael Brigante, please forgive me if I pronounced that wrong, who purchased the family's home for them, allowing them to move out of their small Brooklyn apartment. Brigante later gave his son-in-law about $50,000 to have the family portraits painted. So, for all of the wealth and luxury that Ronald, Big Ronnie, as he was called, Defoe Sr. showed off, he had, in truth, earned very little of it for himself. Big Ronnie, who was reportedly an abusive, violent man, most often he took his anger and frustration out on his eldest child, Ronald Defoe Jr., who actually went by Butch, and as Butch grew up, he struggled to find any common ground with his father. Butch, as he went by, was also bullied at school for being overweight, with kids calling him names like Pork Chop and the Blob. By his teenage years, he had lost most of his weight, though his use of amphetamines, which he had come to rely on, along with alcohol as a coping mechanism. He and his father continued to fight frequently, but Butch once pulled a gun on Ronald Sr., and although Butch would technically employed at his family's dealership, he rarely showed up for work and left early when he did. In general, he spent most of his time doing drugs and drinking, getting into fights and arguing with his parents. Still, no one had expected Ronald Defoe Jr.'s troubles would lead him to commit the Amityville murders. Sorry. I'm so used to the movie, I keep calling it horrors. I'm not laughing at what happened, I'm just laughing at myself. I apologize. Butch's ongoing conflict with his father came to a violent head when he fatally shot Ronald Defoe Sr. with a .35 caliber Marlin rifle as he slept during the early hours of November 13, 1974. But of course, he didn't just kill his father. He also turned the gun on his mother, Louise Defoe. Then 23-year-old Butch went into his bedrooms where his siblings were sleeping and murdered 18-year-old Dawn, 13-year-old Allison, 12-year-old Mark, and 9-year-old John Matthew with the same weapon. After killing his family, Butch took a shower, got dressed, collected incriminating evidence. On his way to work, he threw the evidence, including the gun, into a storm drain. Then he went about his day. He feigned ignorance as to why his father hadn't shown up to work as planned and even called him. As the day went on, he decided to leave work and spend the afternoon with his friends, making sure to mention to all of them that he couldn't get in touch with his family for some reason. Then he prepared for the, quote, discovery, quote, of his family's bodies. In the early evening, Butch ran to a nearby bar screaming for help, according to the New York Daily News. He told patrons of the bar someone had shot his family and begged them to come back with him to the house. They were shocked. Bargoers were greeted by a truly horrific scene. Each member of the Defoe family was found laying face down in bed with fatal bullet wounds. Ronald Defoe Sr. and Louise Defoe had both been shot twice, and their children had been shot one time each. There are crime scene photos, which I am not going to place in this video, as it would likely get taken down, even though it's for learning and educational purposes. I don't feel it would be right either. If you want to look them up, they are all over the internet. According to history, police arrived at the scene and found as an in-shock Ronald Defoe Jr. waiting for them. Defoe initially claimed to authorities that he believed his family had been targeted by the mob. At first, it seemed like the cops might buy his story. They even took him to the police station for protection, but they soon noticed details didn't line up. For example, Defoe maintained that he had been working all morning and with friends all afternoon. Therefore, he couldn't have killed his family. But police quickly determined that the bodies had been shot sometime in the early morning, well before Defoe would have gone to work. And after Defoe mentioned the notorious mob hitman who could have killed his family, police soon found out that hitman was out of state. And by the next day, Ronald Defoe Jr. had confessed to the crime. He told the police, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went by so quick." After being arrested and charged, Defoe's criminal trial, which took place in October 1975, captured attention for two reasons: the sheer brutality of his crimes and the unusual details surrounding his defense. His lawyer built a case claiming that he was an insane man who killed his family in self-defense because of the demonic voice in his head. Ultimately, Defoe was found guilty on 6 counts of second-degree murder in November, and he would later be sentenced to 6th consecutive sentence of 25 to life in prison. But the story of the Amityville murders was not over. For one thing, there was still mysterious surrounding the case. Authorities had no idea how all 6 victims had died in their sleep without a struggle. Another thing that puzzled them was that none of the neighbors heard the gunshot, despite the fact that Defoe did not use a silencer. After Defoe claimed to have drugged his family's dinner, experts noticed that a long time had passed between the meal and the family's death. Perhaps most chillingly, the killer's motives remained uncertain. Though it's clear that the Defoes had many issues with his father, it baffled many that he would go after the rest of his family members, especially his youngest sibling. And considering the fact that Defoe would change his story multiple times in prison, he shed very little light on that haunting mystery. And then, December 1975, a new family had moved into the Defoe's home. And the story goes on from there, but this is the end of the Defoe's murder case. Hey guys, I just wanted to stop in and say that if you want to know more about the family who moved in after the Defoe family, I'd be happy to make a short on this. So if you do want to know, just leave a comment and I'll make a short. The reason I'm not putting it in this video is because it's more of a paranormal issue rather than a true crime issue, so it doesn't really fit in this video. So if you do want to know more, just send us a comment and I will definitely make one. Alright, back to the video. Not sure where in the video I'm going to put this yet, but one thing I saw in a documentary was outside of the house of the Defoes, they had a sign that said "High Hopes," and a police officer that was working the scene had said that it was so sad, the loss of 6 people of their high hopes. And I just thought I should put that in here because it was just ironic. Just so you understand, when I say I'm not sure where I'm going to put this, when I'm making these videos, I make the audios first and I make sections, and I'm not really sure which order they're going to go in or how I'm going to put them. And sometimes I have side notes that I'm not really sure where they'll fit into the video at first, and I guess I could have just not said anything and put it in and you wouldn't have known. But just so you get an idea, that's how I do this. Thank you again for joining us of another episode of Curious Cat Crime Sunday with Shelby and Olivia. Again, I'm sorry for the last 2 weeks, and I hope that this story makes up for the loss in time. And if you didn't see, I did post 2 posts during the time that I was away that are informative posts. One on the mock crime scene, how I went about doing it, what I did during the mock crime scene, and the second was on fingerprint dusting, which was part of my exam. I posted a photo along with a picture of what the cards look like in real life and explained what you would do in a real life situation when dusting for fingerprints. Anyways, have a happy Sunday, and I hope you guys have a great week. See you next time.